Let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the award-winning podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything plus size. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming back to the show a good friend of ours. We've got Addi.
Hey, glad to be back.
Hello, my
Glad
love.
to have you back.
How are you today?
Doing all right. Got a wonderful day off, and I'm talking to two amazing people.
Oh, who are they? Give me their number. Oh. Listen, Addi, we are so chuffed to have you back. Listen, for anyone who doesn't remember our gorgeous Addi, we had her on the podcast. Funnily enough, this time last year we were rounding out season 4, and she's with us to begin to help us round out season 5. And we had the opportunity to explore a little bit of the gaining experience and around. But today we're going to be zeroing in on the transfemme experience. So, Addi, my love, are you ready to get into it, girl?
Oh, I hope so.
You hope so. Well, it's too late. You can't back out of it now. You're locked in. You've been tied to the chair, and now you have to talk to us. So deal with that.
Oh, how rude of podcast hosts not to provide me a chicken exit.
Precisely. We might just have to factor that in for season 6. Tim, write that down. I had to put that in for season 6. But in the
Chicken
meantime,
exit. Got it.
but in the meantime, Addi, my love, I want to ask you here because I feel like we got to ask a little bit about this last time. But this is something I find just so curious because I reflect on my own non-binary journey. The experiences of gaining and how that helped me understand my own gender identity. I'd like to know for you. Did your trans identity and your connection to gaining develop separately, or do you feel like they emerged alongside one another?
Definitely sort of the gaining aspect came first. I'm very much part of that, what I call like obesity epidemic generation, where so much of our media and like health classes was just filled with, make better food choices. And then as a result of that, all of our media was filled with characters coincidentally ballooning to massive sizes from just eating a lot. So, I sort of had that fascination, and then that later developed into, identity and separately kink. Then later on, when I was kind of in like late middle school, definitely early high school, I started thinking more about like my personal identity in terms of like relationships, which, led me to realize, oh yeah, I'm not straight and boring. No offense to straight people out there, just maybe branch out a bit. But I'm pan, and pan has been an incredible experience, and I've loved every second of it. And then, that started getting me thinking about, how I express myself and, how I feel presenting. And then I started realizing, maybe I'm not one of those sissies with a C, And then a little bit after I came to the conclusion that, oh, maybe I am, trans, maybe I am femme. Then I started linking that with the larger identity of gaining and having a bigger self and things like that. And I think sort of that process has kind of made me think about transition in a different way than sort of the normal process I hear, the normal narrative. Obviously, I don't know everyone's experience, and this is just from what I hear, but I hear a lot of people have, at least the way they present it, identity first, then, other aspects like aesthetic or kink. So kind of going about that from the opposite direction has made me have, I don't know, I guess different perspective on it.
It's very interesting to think about. I certainly, over the years, I've certainly said, and I do stand by this, I think there is a big link between what a gainer can experience and what a trans person can experience. If you've never heard me say this before, let me say it here and now. As individuals, we look in the mirror in the bodies that we occupy initially, and we go, I am not fully satisfied with what is looking back at me. And so we take measures and steps to morph into a body that we find more aesthetically pleasing and more reflective of who we really are. A good trans bitch, she might use HRT. A good fat bitch, she finna use the donuts, okay? But we're using the materials that we have in our hands to transform this situation. And as we look in the mirror, again and again and again, as we make these efforts and changes, we start to see that we are approaching the body and the visage that is aligned with how we should see ourselves. So I am personally of the belief, whether or not members of this community see that link for themselves, that we should be standing arm in arm with our trans brothers, sisters, and NBs, because I think we, as gainers, have some insight into what that experience must be like. And so we should be showing up with love and support for our siblings.
And as much as we talk about that love and support for everyone within the queer community, I'd love to know, what has your experience been like as a trans person in the gaming community?
Well, I'll kind of put it like this. There's sort of like two eras to it for me. Is one is like the internet era where you're not really like connected with people physically. You're more just like chatting and sharing. And that's been fine, honestly. I personally haven't had major issues with other people. There was one person on Phoebe once, but that's pretty much it. And I don't even fully remember that incident anymore, thank God. But really, as far as the spaces I've been online, it's either been or it's been very accepting, very welcoming. But then you have like the in-person stuff, and most of the people I've met IRL who are feedists, or into larger bodies in general, are trans. They are queer, non-binary. So I haven't really had in-person experience outside of sort of the quote-unquote trans bubble. But now I've been trying to get more involved with like one of the local fat lib organizations here in the Chicago area, and interacting with people who aren't feedists. There are feedists in the group because there's a lot of overlap between fat lib and feedists, but also overlap with people who aren't trans. Not to say that there isn't a healthy amount of trans people in fat lib in general, which there are, but generally, I've had a pretty good experience in the community.
Yeah, you mentioned changing times, and I was just out at the Leather Bar this last weekend and there was an event going on. I didn't even aware that it was happening, but it was called like the Pink Pony Club or something like that.
Mm.
And it was just a sort of gender fluid expression party kind of night where like the drag queen who was hosting was bearded. Uh, Most of the people who performed were either on the queer or trans or non-binary spectrum somewhere. I even saw the cutest non-binary pup with the cutest little spare tire belly that I just wanted to take jealous shots out of. So like I see what you're saying. Like there is a change happening, and the drag queen even made it a point to say, I don't ever want to hear this is a men's only bar, and this is at a dyed in the wool leather
Mhm.
men's bar, one of the oldest in Cleveland. So I was really, really pleased to hear that. So you're right, things
Mm.
are changing, thankfully.
It's a hard one, especially I think for some of us, because Addi, I think you're a little younger than us, right?
Yeah, I'm about 22 right now. 23.
Jesus Christ, a fetus. Right. Well, when I was Christ, I sound like Tim. When I was your age, back in my day, when
Fuck you for
dinosaurs.
that, by the way.
Well, listen, back when I was first coming out, shall I say, I remember it being the mid 2010s. And so we're in that era of conversations around intersectionality and consent are really starting to like take off. It's not to say that these things should never have been the case and was sort of randomly discovered one day, but it's to say that I very much came out in a time in which I was caught right in between people around my age who were insisting on some very firm boundaries and people who were substantially older than me who couldn't give a shit about boundaries, and sort of learning how over time as a community, quote unquote, we've operated with a sense of very flippant approaches to language, to humor, to ideas of intersectionality and all of these different bits and pieces. And it makes me so happy to know that around the world people are really starting to still move in that direction of that inclusivity, despite what seems to be happening in the news and in the media.
And so I'm curious, did anything change in how you were perceived or treated during or after you transitioned?
I think so. Obviously, I've been a lot more nice to myself. I guess I can put it like that. I think a few people who've gone down, the transition journey, getting rid of this like very self-critical lens and edge to how we view ourselves and how we think about ourselves and how people think about us. Because we can definitely get in a rut of thinking that our dislike of ourselves extends to people disliking us in the same way. And, that's usually not true. I guess the only like negative thing I've had with sort of like my trans experience is I was on a date once. And, I was very clear with her. She's trans femme was, she is trans femme. Very clear, like, oh, I've had a busy work week. I can't exactly like doll up for this date. I'm very sorry. And date didn't go great. Won't go into details. Towards the end of it, she's like, "Oh yeah, when I first saw you, I thought you were a chaser." I'm like, ugh. And I think some people just put a little too much emphasis on meeting the stereotype, meeting the standard. And I try not do that with other trans femme people I know because I want that sort of respect put to me too.
Yeah, I will say there is again an irony there that this person presumed you were a chaser, and in my mind, I actually went, "Wait, do they think you were a trans chaser or a fat chaser?" I was like, "Wait, which chaser do they presume you were?" But therein again lies the same thing for many gainers who maybe don't occupy the largest of bodies. There is that experience of people, and I've been on the receiving end of that. I know a good few of us have, where people are like, "Oh, because you're an encourager slash feeder, right?" Baby, I'm gonna knock you upside the head. How dare you? I am a gainer. I'm not the chaser. This is rude. Oh my goodness. Again, links between the trans and gaining experiences. But outside of that individual, I'm glad to know that those experiences have been mostly positive for you. I do want to ask, I feel like this is maybe one of those questions where people probably ask this a lot. But for the listenership who maybe don't engage in a lot of this kind of discourse, I do want to put it to you here. When it comes to your trans experience specifically, what is one thing that you wish the cisgendered people in your life were more aware of?
Like I'm a huge person when it comes to like representation in the media. And the thing I really want to put is don't think that every trans narrative is like the ones you see in TV and movies, like the ones that immediately jump to mind, whether they're good or bad is another discussion. But like I think it was I Am Jazz on TLC, Amelia Perez on Netflix, like all the big media presentations of trans people. Usually it's medical with HRT, it's surgical with bottom or top surgery, or even FFS, facial surgery. A lot of trans people don't do any of that, and that's perfectly fine. It's just the media narrative, obviously, generally is always about pretty people and perfect people. Or on the
Well, not in
worst
the case of
end,
Amelia
quote unquote,
Perez. In the case of Amelia Perez, it's about untalented people. That was so bad. No one could
oh,
sing.
obviously.
That was disgraceful. Some
Mhm.
trans people have talent. That's
I
the
love
defiance
if you
there.
go to the Wikipedia page for Amelia Perez. I'm not sure if they changed it. But for the longest time, the controversies section on the Wikipedia page just read the LGBTQ community and Mexico.
Oh my God. What a what a fucking weird presentation. I do think everyone collectively turned around and said, "This is not a good film." And I think it
Oh
was
no.
more to do with the quality of it rather than the fact
Yeah.
that it was about transness, which again,
Hmm.
very refreshing. We can find truly there are genuine critiques, people, that we could talk about.
Hmm.
Let's stay focused on the things that should be spoken of, you know. Ugh.
And like the vaginoplasty song that went like semi-viral. Like that's sort
Man
of an
to
example I'm
woman,
thinking
woman to
of.
man, or whatever the fuck, like,
Yeah, yeah,
ugh,
yeah, yeah.
so stupid.
Where it's like that song promotes this idea of like, obviously trans medicalism that a lot of like the weird existence of far right trans people promote, like Blair White, where it's like, oh, she can be accepted because she's had hormones and surgeries and she passes. Same thing with like Amelia Perez, where it's like, oh, the only way to because they're doing this weird like face off identity change thing with trans identity, which is a problem in its own right. But like, oh, the trans experience must be surgeries. And again, with like the weird song where it's like, oh, you can get all these surgeries at once, and in under a year, you're perfectly passing. Weird stuff like that where people think like, oh, in a year, you should be able to perfectly pass with all the surgeries and the hormones and the accessories and hair extent. Like, that's that's not real. That's not real. And like again, with like even pretty good representation like I Am Jazz, that gives a bad understanding of what like the trans experience is generally for, the wine moms watching TLC. The same way that like, and I know I'm gonna get some slack for this because I know there's a lot of fans out there. The way that like RuPaul's Drag Race poorly represents drag to like the average audience member. And I know this isn't fully about the trans experience, but I'm gonna bring it up real quick. It took 10 years from the very first drag competition show featuring a drag king until they had a drag king on RuPaul's Drag Race. 10 years. And in that time, like Dragula had a drag king winner. We Are Here on HBO had a whole bunch of drag kings and
King of
non-binary drag
Drag
performers.
is
Obviously,
a new
King
show
of
that's
Drag.
happening. And shout
Yeah.
out to King Molasses.
And
Baby, listen, if y'all don't know who King Molasses is, that man is
mhm.
so
Mm.
fine.
Oh
Like
yeah.
him and Landon, listen, as a male attracted person, him and like Landon Sider's werewolf look that he did on season 3 of Dragula, I
Mm.
was like, I am so horny. I am
That for me, that was
aroused.
his mariachi vampire. Like that mariachi vampire was hot
That
as
was so hot.
hell.
That was so fucking hot. Oh my God. And look, if you ever
But
wanted
like,
an opportunity to like delve into the notion of, ooh, does a
mhm,
little bit of gender something or other do a little something for
mhm.
me? Look at a good bitch and some good drag because shit, all of a sudden you go, they went from a regular gay man to looking like a woman, a very beautiful woman. Yes, it's almost like gender's a
Well,
Mhm.
performance and
there was
largely a
this
dress-up competition. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
there was this Puerto Rican model that I was following. Well, I don't know if he was Puerto Rican, so I probably shouldn't say that. But at Latin model that I was following, who was a bigger person, but had a very femininized body, like huge moves and
Oh,
big
was that
love
Addi
handles.
Vale or Eddie Vale or
Yeah, yeah,
something?
yeah, yeah.
That one? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like hyper masculine face, like totally hyper masculine face with the groomed facial hair and the masculine brow bone and cheekbones and everything, but this hyper femme body. And I was like, holy shit, that is hot as hell.
I just wish a lot of cisgender people would stop, watching the big mainstream things and thinking they have like an understanding of how it works. Huge shout out to I Am Driftwood. They have a website, they have a whole bunch of stuff. They have a bunch of YouTube interviews, which are great. I Am Driftwood interviews a whole bunch of trans people from all over the country, some non-binary people, obviously queer people as well, including, oh, I'm forgetting her name. I'm forgetting her name, and I feel bad about it. But she's the trans woman from Pink Flamingos, the John Waters film. She was one of the earliest people to go to John Hopkins for gender reassignment surgery.
Dang.
Yeah. And I Am Driftwood, they just collect all these great and varied and different trans experiences from all over the country, all over time, different ages. I'm forgetting her name, but there was this great trans woman who just started as, like exploring gender through cross-dressing with wives' clothing in the 70s. As I've heard a few people repeat that sort of story who are older trans femmes of, experimenting with the nearest femme clothing near you,
Hmm.
which at the time happened to be the wives.
Well, let's take a moment here then to suggest to the listeners, I Am Driftwood. Go and check out their stuff. As we always say on the pod, when we interview people about intersectional experiences, we're here to speak to them. We're here to get what we can, as much as we can, in the hour. Right, that we try to allot for this. But there's obviously
Mhm.
so very much is the theme we're coming across so far today. So please take the opportunity to go and check out I Am Driftwood, go and look at some of their interviews and go and get yourself some
I
education.
just looked it up to make sure I got it right.
Oh,
I just looked it up to make sure I was right. It's I'm from Driftwood.
I'm from Driftwood. There we go. I'm
Just
from
wanted to make sure I get it right.
Now, Addi, my love, I want to ask you here. Let's walk the line between the transfemme and the gaining itself. What is your day-to-day look like when it comes to that experience? What does it feel like in your body as a trans feminine person who gains?
I don't really think about it, honestly. Like, I've just come so far with both where it's like, if I'm hungry, I eat. If I want to eat, a pot of something, I'll just make a pot of something and I'll eat it. Like, I don't really think about it. I just take care of myself in both ways. I make sure I'm feeling good emotionally about my body, my size, my identity. I take steps in all directions to make sure I'm taking care of myself mentally, physically. I make sure I go out and get fresh air and sunlight pretty much every day because that's, very important to mental health is to get out of the house sometimes and just, enjoy a nice chill afternoon. Like I think I'm just reached that point with like comfortability with myself where I don't really need to like think about it too much. And I think that's pretty good, honestly.
And so, do you feel like you ever experienced any moments of dysphoria or dysmorphia on your journey? And if so, like, how do you navigate that?
I think the biggest amount of like dysphoria I feel is occasionally when I'm in like majority queer spaces, I think. And I think that's just because sometimes like to piggyback off what I just said in the last question, when I'm in public, when I'm by myself, I feel very confident. I feel very comfortable. But then when I'm put around other similar people in like a concentrated area, like a club or a meeting, or even just like a chill meet out or something, I get a little like self-critical of myself when looking at everyone else. And I guess part of that's just where I am in my journey. I'm chubby, but I definitely could be a bit bigger. I feel femme, and quite a few people and close friends, affirm that. But sometimes when I look at other trans femme people in the area, I'm like, damn, I wish I could be her. Just general, I'm in the process and I'm working type stuff where, I see someone that I have an admiration for, like a mutual admiration. And I'm like, yeah, I wish I could be there right now. And, I do get a little dysmorphic and dysphoric from that. But then I just have to remind myself, you're going to get there eventually. But in the meantime, you're fine as you are now.
Hmm. And I do want to ask, because I know we talked a little bit before about like, the misconceptions that people might have about aspects of the trans experience. Thinking very specifically about what it means for you to be a trans gainer, are there any misconceptions that people have about who you are, what you do, and what that looks like?
I guess it's a blessing and a curse because I very much am a smaller creator. Like I have a healthy following on like Insta. I'm building up my BlueSky. I'm working on my content page. I don't have as, for better or for worse, a vocal community behind my stuff. So at least when it comes to like gaming, I don't really see that many misconceptions. I think the only place I've really seen a lot of like stereotyping is one of those. I haven't seen it in years, and obviously it's like I think it's nearing a decade old at this point. Video from like one of those Barcroft or Truly or Hooked on the Look channels where it's a trans femme feeder, and the comments are what you expect from I think like a 10-year-old YouTube video where it's obviously mix of transphobic and mix of other things definitely because there's definitely like in the conversation of like oh helpless woman can't resist being fattened up by quote unquote abusive partner like there's definitely a bit of like misogyny in there acting like why would any woman want this? Women are helpless against the quote unquote big strong man stuff. Like, there's definitely a tinge of like misogyny in comments like that.
Yeah, I mean, and just reflecting on this conversation, I think back on when I went out into the gay nightclub scene and spent, the better part of a decade there, and even heard things from, Twinkie gay guys who may have presented very masculine, but weren't exactly the most masculine acting,
Mm.
giving grief to the other twinks that were even less masculine presenting and more feminine hyper acting. And and I'm just like, this is idiotic. Like, we need every type of queer that exists. And I have always loved femi guys. I
Mm.
never had a problem with it. You can come wearing your tutu and your like warmers and your hair and butterfly clips. It doesn't bother me.
But also, like, that is that not the whole point of the LGBTQIA plus community, is that all of us are raised to be cisgendered. All of us are raised to be heterosexual. We're all of us raised, and we know what it means to be coded either boy or girl, and we know what it means to be coded with very specific expectations of that one gender option that we're given, because you're not given the choice of the other. And the struggle of what it means to be gay at the very minimum is to know that you are in opposition to that in some way, shape, or form, no matter how it is that you present. And the freedom of queerness is that it actually doesn't matter. But it's very interesting that a lot of people walk into queerness not as a liberation from that sense of shame that other people have put on them, but they look at it as if it's being edified to say, no, 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 you're not a femme little fag. Them, however, it's very so many people only walk into liberation with the idea of what they themselves can get out of it, and they don't have any desire, any intention to see liberation for anyone else. And certain
Mhm.
queers wonder why it is that our rights movement halted in the mid 2010s and didn't go much further after equality of marriage, because they decided that they had done their job, pack it in, call it a day, cup of tea and a biscuit. Nobody else needs rights. We've done our job. Everything is done. Homophobia is cured. And trans people are the canaries in the mine.
Mhm.
Because who is it ever going to first start happening to? Who is it ever going to be the first that it happens to in our community? Sorry, I get off my soapbox.
Well, and switching gears here for a second, I'd like to ask about, because if comparison is the thief of joy, even though so many of us do that, how do you balance internal validation with feedback and attention that you get from others?
I kind of separate any validation I get from other people because I do recognize that like a lot of it online is just transactional. Like in person, I know that most of the validation I get is from people that care, is from people that want me to be happy and be me. But online, I know that most of it is people wanting something out of it, you know. I'm very glad to have a lot of online friends and online people I talk to who validate me honestly. But I do recognize that a lot of validation is just, I want to get something out of this. I want pictures, I want videos, I want you to give me that tenfold. You know, like, oh, I'll say you're cute, but I also want you to make me feel 10 times better than that. So I've been trying to learn to accept the friends and close people validation kind of in a way because I've also been trying to validate myself in a lot of ways. Obviously, you know, as mentioned before, a lot of trans people, we get very down on ourselves and it's hard to break out of that cycle of like not validating yourself. So like I've definitely been trying to understand where a lot of the good outside validation is coming from and just really start validating myself and recognizing that what I am doing is enough and that I'm working towards more and it's fine that I'm not there yet.
I think that's an important line, not only for trans individuals, but again for gayners, because I think sometimes we become very dependent on the validation we get from people within the community, especially through a sex and desirability context, which we are sexual beings, a great many of us. Many of us are motivated at our core by a sense of sex within our gaining journeys. So it can be tricky to balance a sense of I want to be objectified, but also I want to be valued as a person as well. And I will say, at large, I don't think we do very good as a community loving on the human. So
Mhm.
I think that's a good word, what you've just shared with us for gainers as well, about appreciating what is close to us and taking that validation without expectation. And I think more of us should be willing to give that love in return. I say this about gainers all the time. We should all of us be admirers at the very least.
Mhm.
Because you know what you want to hear. You know what it's like to go without the love and the validation. Go and give it to a good bitch, especially someone who you know is working hard, whether or not they look the largest at the moment. Disregard that. If the motivation is to champion people, champion those who need it the most. Do that, not just edify your favorites, you know? Um,
Mhm.
and to that point, I know we are just talking about validation. What has helped you most in terms of support within the community?
I guess it's for me, it's mostly just been connecting with other trans and genderqueer people in the community. There are still issues with representation in the community, even though it's getting better. There's certain forums online, which I will not name, which will call models like abusive because they don't show their kids on their Instagram, even though the model's like, I don't put my kid on my content Instagram. Like weird stuff like that, which I I I'm very much horrified that that still exists out there on the internet. But when you're able to connect with other people who have maybe a similar experience or even adjacent experiences, like there's so much more able to understand how you're feeling by them talking about similar things. And I've conversed with so many great trans, queer, and non-binary people all across the place. I've chatted with people in Australia and the UK, and of course across the US and Canada. And like, it's just made me feel more myself, seeing other people experiencing similar things and who are able to express that. Because obviously, we can connect and validate, obviously, intersectionality. We can connect and validate if we don't share similar experiences. That's a big part of community building. But also at the same time, we have to recognize that, hey, sometimes we just need to, chat with people who might be going through the same thing. Whether that's, going to a support group for trans people, whether that's getting engaged in Fat Lib, or finding a non-kink focused little clave of the community, that's just such a good way to find validation and support, is just start chatting about our experiences with each other and finding similar people.
And to sort of continue that line of thought, like what advice would you give to any trans person who's interested in gaining, but feeling kind of uncertain of whether or not they want to take that first step?
Well, I think part of it is sort of viewing it through a neutral lens first. Like if you are a trans person that is getting on HRT, like one of the side effects of HRT is like increased appetite and gaining weight. Like just come to, sort of an understanding with your body if you are doing HRT that I'm going to gain weight and that's fine, And then see how you feel after that, after like a nice bit of like, natural, healthy weight gain. And if it's something you want to keep going with, and keep going with it.
Hmm. And closing out today's episode, I'd like to ask you for a vision. If you were to envision a more inclusive and supportive gaining a community, what does that look like to you?
Part of it is we sort of have to get rid of like this everyone is content sort of idea. Like most platforms out there for like chatting with other feedists are also video platforms where you can buy content. They're also story platforms where you can buy feedist literature, or they're dating sites where the goal is to meet someone or have a hookup or something. Like, I think it would benefit us to also just be social, like realize that there's so much more to this community than the meat and potatoes of kink, and to just realize that we can just hang out. Like it would benefit so much greatly if people just hung out more. If we just had fun little meetups, go watch a movie, go to a restaurant and just eat a regular meal, stuff like that, where we can talk kink during it. But the main goal isn't kink. The main goal is just to meet other people and share experiences. Because then that would open the doors for, trans people to share their experience, and obviously non-white feedists to share their experience.
We harp on this all the time.
Yeah.
Community
Mhm.
builds representation. Community, we can, and then we can
Mhm.
have diversity and all the other things we want. It's like, but you have to be willing to get out of your house and do something.
Yeah, there
Mhm.
needs to be more to the conversation than simply receiving with hands outstretched. You need to be willing to offer something up in exchange. And, the price for community is vulnerability and it's inconvenience. So I think more of us need to be cognizant of that as we move forward into 2026. And as the years tick on by, I think there is more and more evidence showing that we need to be finding opportunities to connect intimately with one another in ways that give of the heart and of the mind and not just of the genitals. But Addi, I want to say a massive thank you for
Mhm.
everything today. This has been such a pleasure. Where can the listeners find you online?
Well, they can follow me on Instagram. They can now follow my BlueSky. I got a BlueSky now. Of course, I'm on a few other sites, but mostly follow the Instagram BlueSky. Give me a follow if you'd like.
Marvelous. Well, listen, you all, that is a wrap now here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, our guest, the podcast, or just us in general, please share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BlueSky at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram at Thicky Mouse and Grommr at Orpheus. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or visit our website at podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to become a financial supporter of the show, you can donate to our PayPal, and you can always write us at thethickradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, fans.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Spotify podcast
Artwork, media design, editing, and production by James Heinzen.
with original theme music by CYMK.